Exam time is close, so here are 10 tips to implement before or during your exam. Cheating a bit here, but just a reminder for some common sense things like sleeping early and packing all your things the night before, and also having a breakfast if your exam is longer or later on during the day. Number 2, overstimulation. If I looked at my phone and saw a message or a piece of news that triggered some emotions, I knew that my mind will dwell on that for the rest of the day. And even if I wasn't consciously thinking about it, it would be in my unconscious space somewhere. Think of it like opening a new tab in your browser. Each time you see a new Instagram post or what some random person said online, you open a new tab. And even though it is in the background, as you open more and more tabs, your browser gets slower and slower. Just like how getting stimulated by new information slows down your brain. So if I had an exam, I would try and avoid anything to do with the internet or social media beforehand, and this allows you to have a clear mind. Most of us, when we get stressed or anxious, start taking really quick and shallow breaths. But when you think about it, breathing is how our cells get nutrients, and this is what keeps us alive. So by taking short and shallow breaths, not only are you making yourself more anxious, but we're also depriving ourselves of the most important thing to function properly. And it's definitely easier said than done. I would get quite stressed before exams, but also during an exam, if I saw a hard question or something. And so every time I noticed myself panicking, I would take a couple of deep breaths through my diaphragm. And so what this means is if you just put your hand over your stomach, each breath should kind of move your hand up and down. So if you inhale, it should move your hand up. And then exhale will move your hand down. And definitely try this, because just by taking a couple of deep breaths, I was able to calm the nerves and focus on the task at hand. So as weird as it sounds, make sure you're breathing properly. And just as a side note, this is the same thing with water, so always make sure that you're hydrating yourself during your exam. That way you're not depriving your brain and body of the two most essential things. Visualize your exam. This can be extremely powerful, and you may have heard of the experiment where 3 groups of people were practicing how to shoot in basketball. One group practiced every day for 30 days. The second group did nothing, and the third group only visualized themselves practicing for 30 days. And the results showed that the first group improved the most, as you may expect, but the third group closely followed. And this shows you the power of mental visualization. And so what I did was I closed my eyes and tried to visualize the entire day. So that includes how I got to school, the exam lineup, waiting at my desk for the examiners to say start reading, as well as doing the actual exam, and what happens if I come across a difficult question that I didn't know. You basically want to experience all the things and emotions that you might come across during your actual exam. That way you can overcome them now rather than during your actual assessment. Read effectively. So most exams require some form of reading, so reading a question or reading an article. And sometimes during an exam, I would just sit there and reread the same thing over and over again, and not being able to understand it. So either because of stress or because I was panicking. And this is by far one of the worst feelings, so you definitely want to avoid this. So apart from the tips given above, like breathing properly, another way is to read with your finger on the page. And this has been shown to help with reading speed, especially if we're feeling nervous. And also, use a highlighter to note down important information. So yes, it does sound a bit like common sense, but especially for those longer application questions, it's crucial to note down every single piece of information, because that could be the difference between getting a mark or not at all. Use reading time effectively. Essentially, I like to use reading time to read those questions that have a lot of words in them. So for example, short answer questions and not the multiple choice. And this was because I was relatively calm during reading time, and so I was able to pick out more of the nuances in the wording and be able to plan out how I would approach these questions once writing time starts. Confronting hard questions. When I came across a hard question, I would definitely first try and understand it, but if I still had no clue, then I would definitely skip it. And this is because keeping up the momentum is incredibly important, and it almost gives you a sense of confidence that allows you to answer more and more questions. And so it just becomes this positive feedback cycle. And one of the worst feelings that I have experienced many times is dwelling on one question for too long, then realizing that you've wasted so much time that you can't complete the other sections. So definitely avoid this by skipping any difficult questions. And just as a side note, make sure before you skip, you have a go and try and understand the question first, because your subconscious mind will start processing the information, and this is why sometimes when we go back to it at the end, we might think of a completely new idea to approach the question. For exams that have a multiple choice section and a short answer section, I found it helpful to begin with the short answer, then end with the multiple choice. Because if you're running out of time, you can always guess the multiple choice, but you can't really guess the short answer. Be aware of consequential marks. For questions that have many parts to them, like part A, part B, and part C, first know that each part is often related to the next. So for example, if you don't know how to answer the first part, but part B says use your answer from part A, then you can always make up an answer for part A and then use that in part B. This way you can still get one part correct rather than getting the entire question wrong. If you've just completed an exam and you have more coming up, it's important not to dwell on how good or how bad you did. Remember that regret is a wasted emotion, and it's only going to siphon energy and motivation away from you from doing well next time. And on the flip side, if you think you did well, it's important not to get complacent. Keep up the momentum. So these are 10 tips to take away before your actual exams. I hope they were helpful, and I wish you all the best. Take care.